Hello and welcome to the Rewrite Your Story podcast. If you are someone who is looking to take power back into your life and be in control of your destiny, then this is for you. This podcast was created to empower others by sharing the tools that have truly transformed my life. So sit back, relax, and let's start rewriting your story today. Hello and welcome to episode 1. It is finally here. Thank you so much to everybody for hanging in and waiting in anticipation. It's not the easiest thing following someone on social media when you have no idea what they're doing. So thank you so much to those who have already started to support me. If you are listening to this podcast for the first time and you want to join the Rewrite Your Story community, we can be found on Instagram and Facebook at rewriteyourstory.ca. But anyway, let's get into this first episode. So what we're going to talk about today is just a bit more about why I started this and the reasoning behind it. And then episode 2 is where we really get into the hard and heavy stuff. Episode 2 is actually where I have been able to confine my whole story into one episode. So I warn you now, it is a tough listen, but it is worth it. And the reason I felt that I had to share my story is to be truly authentic. I cannot ask you guys to start speaking out about this stuff and for looking for help in your own life if I don't do the same thing. I don't know about you, but there's so many people I followed on social media that they talk the talk, but when you actually meet them in person, I'm like, oh wow, I used to love looking at all your lives and your little motivational videos you would post, but you're a fraud. You're not who you say you are. You don't even do this in your own life. Like, you're just doing this for validation. Like, what the hell? So for me, I feel like I have to do what I'm asking you guys to do. Otherwise, I'm fake. And that's just not what this is about. And I also want to remove the stigma around abuse and asking for help and talking about your issues. So if I truly want to do that, I have to lead by example and do that myself. So yeah, no one likes talking about their dirty laundry. But hey, episode 2 is all about that. Very few people on this earth know my story. And I'm sure it'll come as a surprise to some of you. And others, it may make absolute sense because you've probably gone through something too and you notice the patterns. But yeah, I really hope this gets into the ears of the right people. And I just hope it helps. So, why did I create this podcast? I think when you do a lot of therapy, for anybody who's out there, if you've done therapy, that's great. And if you haven't, try it. Regardless if you went through trauma or not, I think therapy is for everyone. It's just such a great thing. Such a great thing. But anyway, the first time I went through therapy for my trauma, we did what we call inner child work. And basically, you just kind of talk to the younger you, talk to you at the time that this happened in your life and, say kind things to the younger you. And through doing that work, I thought about not only the things I wanted to say to younger me, but I kind of looked back and I thought, how could this situation have been different? If I still went through the trauma and I still went through the horrible things that happened, how could I have got help for this at the time rather than years and years later? What would have had to have been different in society for me to get help and not be ashamed of what happened to me, not live in fear, not feel like I couldn't speak up? Because that was the biggest issue for me, was not only giving my trauma a name and identifying it, but then admitting that I needed help and knowing where to go to get help and who to talk to and just where to begin that healing process. I had no idea. It's not taught in schools. Like, sex education really needs a revamp. But yeah, I just kind of thought what could have helped me back then. And something like this. Something where an absolute nobody that I can relate to, someone who's not a celebrity, someone who's not doing this as a full-time job, someone who's just a regular old person who's going through something like me, but who's talking about it and normalizing it. And I think that's a big thing. Abuse and trauma and, even just asking for help is such a taboo thing. Nobody wants to admit it. Nobody wants to seek it. Well, publicly anyway. I feel like we all do deep down. And that's why I've created this podcast. I want to remove that stigma and have talking about trauma and abuse to be a routine every Thursday. Well, at least listening to me talk about it. But I hope it then encourages you guys to talk about it. And talk about your own stories. Yes, I will be talking about my story because that's the one thing I can speak to. But by no means do I want this to be a pity party. I really do not want people to be listening to this podcast and think, oh, poor Amy, or, trying to validate me for going through what I went through and being who I am now. Like, I'm really not looking for that. I appreciate, those kind words from a few people who've already reached out to me, but that's really not what I'm looking for here. It's not the purpose of this. I really want you guys to talk amongst yourselves, start having these conversations in your friend circles, in your family, in your peer groups, even at work, and really normalize this. Because the more I started talking about it, the more I realized that so many of my friends have gone through this stuff. So many of my family have gone through this stuff. But yet so many of them still haven't spoke up, still haven't went to the authorities, still haven't got therapy, and most importantly, they haven't started healing. So I guess this podcast is my gift, not only to you guys, but to 3-year-old Amy who needed this. If you're currently going through trauma and you're trying to make sense of it, I hope this helps you. If you've went through something in your past that you have suppressed, and in turn it has taken over how you think, it's taken over your mood, and you really want to change your relationships with those around you and yourself, then this is for you. If you're someone who wants more for their life, you may have not went through trauma or abuse, but maybe you're in a rut. Maybe you can't get out of a certain way of thinking because that's how everybody else in your town is, but you feel different. You feel like you're called to do something more, but you don't know where to begin. Then this is for you. Yes, in its infancy, we are going to start this podcast talking about abuse and trauma, and I have some amazing people lined up to be interviewed on here talking about their work and what they are able to do to support any of you who are looking for help. And we'll also cover some really interesting topics.